All right, so I'm gonna do the quick version of the intros here. Um, so obviously we got Shawn Bowen here, the CISO at Restaurant Brands International, and as if you couldn't already figure it out, Burger King, Popeyes, Louisiana Kitchen, Tim Hortons, and probably some others, right?
For now, those three.
And all of these gentlemen have 20 plus years of experience, and we can just assume they know what they're doing given the positions they're in, and we'll move on from there. I'm not going to read the bios; they're all on the website. Everyone can go read them. We've got Matt Connor here, who's the CISO at NGA. So we'll see what we can get him to talk about. I know we have some people on the line that probably will try to push the boundaries because they always do. And we have Brent Conlon here from Edelman, right? Did I say that right?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
And we've got a number of interesting things to talk about. So we're keeping this somewhat informal, but what I will do is update the slide there. So this is the theme. These are the themes. So I'm going to start with Shawn, just because I know over the years you've had some fun with this. So board communications, right? So we hear this all the time. There's been, in fact, I was watching a webinar a couple days ago where they were talking about the challenges between the technical folks, the security leadership, the CISO, et cetera, and the board. And then you have some CISOs that are really close to the board and then have the opposite problem. We've seen a bit of that as well, where they don't quite know how to talk to the technical folks, which is a strange proposition for me. So I would say, you know, it's an interesting theme that keeps going on. And honestly, I didn't think it would come up as much as it has today. So it's come up with a number of our speakers today through other talks through the day. And then we had a number of questions in both tracks that kind of fit with this theme too, right? Like cybersecurity and the leadership and the difference between them. So, you know, why don't you start with introducing yourself and then jump into that theme and you know, kind of tell us a little bit about, based on the introduction, you know, what you're seeing in your organizations or your previous organizations, and kind of what role you play as a change agent for that.
Yeah, so I'll give you a quick background because it's relevant. I spent 20 years mainly doing government, whether contractor or civil servant, in parallel to being a reservist in the military. And now Burger King, Popeyes, Tim Hortons. I think that is the 180-degree polar opposite of the government. Very little regulatory governance outside of some data privacy, as well as some SOX because we're publicly traded, and some PCI stuff due to payment. But outside of that, it's kind of the Wild West. It's what we decide is best for our business. And so coming from a world where no matter who you reported to, there was a legal requirement for them to meet cybersecurity. I don't have that luxury, which when I was in the government, that was not seen as a luxury, but now it is. You know, like I now wish I can lean on some legal policies, et cetera. So that means you have to be better at your game. Not saying that government aren't. It's just it's a different argument to make. You can't just lean on black and white. You have to kind of say, here's the reason why you need to do this, and really convince people that it's a value add. And from the board perspective specifically, I'm the first CISO for RBI, so they didn't understand the role of cybersecurity and how it worked. And there are still definitely people still there that have the perception that security is a person who just comes in after everything's done and locks up shop and then patrols it with a flashlight. And we know roughly the efficacy of mall security guards. It's not exactly what we're looking for here. So there's a lot of education and evangelism to get those team members to understand our value. So that has been a hurdle for us. Unfortunately, the value of an incident is one that you capitalize on. I don't like FUD, and so I try not to use that anywhere I can. But when we have an incident, small or large, you can rely back to that regularly and do some real math on how that impacted. I think one of the things we fail as geeks is we go into the technical jargon real quick and just say, we could have protected this by doing this. And that doesn't mean anything to anybody. What they care about is what were the work days lost, what were the primary and secondary impacts financially, whether it was we lost sales because our point of sale system was down, or we had to divert a project by 3 days or 4 days, and that caused X amount of impact. And so being able to translate that technical to a business impact is where you make your allies the best. And so I think from my perspective, it's jumping from the opposite side, from the government to this spectrum, and not to mention we have franchisees, which is a whole nother ballgame. In the government, no one got to do anything without the CISO's permission. Here, I have 1,000 franchisees that get a vote no on an idea, which is absurd to me. So that's kind of the dynamics that you have to learn to work within. But I think it's there, and all my peers, all the other brands, whether it's a little redheaded girl, a cow, or a clown, they are all in the same boat, speaking to the boards and giving their impact from a business perspective. So it's here. It's just now it's where do you put the CISO in the role? Some of us report to the COO, some to the CIO, some to the CFO. I think that really depends on your business and your risk appetite within your company.
All right, thank you, Shawn. I want to give everyone a chance to talk to this, because even with Matt, I think it's relevant to the leadership point of this. So Matt, same thing. Can you introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background, and then same 2 questions.
Sure. Well, like I said, the bio is out on the webpage, so I'm not too worried about that. But if you're not familiar with the NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the hyphen's important. It was really important to have a 3-letter acronym, because if you're a 4-letter initialization, you're a scientific organization, and if you're 3-letter, you're an IC agency. So the agency really was emphatic that we're going to be a hyphenated 3-letter agency. We provide geospatial products to decision makers, war fighters, and anybody who's ever flown on a plane or been on a boat using instruments. So we're kind of everywhere. Some of our missions go back actually over 100 years based on statutory authorities. Because of that, we're kind of everywhere. We're partnering with academia. We're partnering with, like I said, military and industry. So Shawn was talking about some of the challenges and some of the benefits we have within the government space, and using those authorities, whether they're FISMA or other regulatory kinds of authorities, I can kind of get into any door I need to, right? So that's quite a privilege, and I recognize that not everybody has that. So getting to the board is not terribly hard, or our analog of the board. So we have a 3-star admiral running the agency and multiple layers of senior executives, leading the various functional areas. Getting to them, not too hard. Making them care is the real trick, and I think Shawn really laid it out. From my perspective, the words compliance should never be part of a conversation I have with anybody who counts, right? Nobody's won an argument ever with compliance. I need to talk about risk, and I cannot talk about risk in the language of the priesthood, right? The cyber weenies. I've got to talk about risk in the language of mission outcomes. We can do this, we can't do this because reasons. Tonight, the 82nd Airborne is going to try to make it from this point in Afghanistan to the other point, and if we don't protect this mission, they might not be able to. Those are the kinds of consequential conversations that we have with our leadership, and those are the ones that count. I also have a luxury problem. I'm not often pressed to defend the budget. With all those guidelines we have, I mean, I'm not up against profit as a bottom line, right? I'm up against nation state actors. There are incredible stacks of imperatives that we are obligated, required to follow. So it's as Shawn said, bringing the A game there is tough, because there's a little bit of a luxury, right? But talking about how I can protect and enable the mission, how I can talk about delivering on the commander's intent, in our case, what he's recently describing as a moonshot to deliver the real power of GeoInt. That's how I have to frame my conversations. And for those coming up who are looking for a role, maybe not in government, maybe not in the intelligence community, maybe not in the Department of Defense, but the higher up you go in the leadership stack, the more I learn that security jargon has its place in your security teams, and mission and business outcomes are what wins the day. So what we're working on now is continuing to try to define the handful of super simple, preferably in primary colors, metrics that we can show period over period to executive leaders to say we're good or we're not. I also want to emphasize the value. An early mentor of mine told me about the power of a status report. Whether or not they are listening, the power of a status report is, when that next cyber Pearl Harbor happens, when that event happens, boss, I told you this last quarter, told you this the quarter before, told you this the quarter before. It might not necessarily make the situation any better, but it might save a job in the sense of capitalizing on that continuous communication loop, whether or not they avail themselves of it. And so it's a bit of CYA, I guess that belies my government background, but I also think it's an incredibly powerful way to communicate to your leadership, wherever they are, here's where we're at and here's where we're going, and I told you.
All right, awesome, thanks, Matt. Brett, same questions and intro in the front.
Yep, so I'm Brett Conlon, I'm the CISO for Edelman Financial Engines. Prior to that, I was with the FBI. So my background is very similar to everyone here. I think that what we've talked about in terms of how we bring out the government side when you are fully regulated to going to the business side where you have to build those relationships. My experience in the government was a little bit different. I was always at odds with the CISO. The CISO would always come to me and tell me that I need to shut a server down or throw over a POAM report and tell me here are all the things I needed to get fixed without ever understanding what our business was. So I was there about 10 years, and I think through that time, I had 3 or 4 different leadership CISOs come in and tell me that I had malware on my servers, I had 24 hours to shut it down, or else I would be brought to, I never figured out what room that was going to be, but someone was going to get a lot of trouble. And my mission was, part of my mission was malware analysis. So of course I have malware on the machine. Thank you for telling me that. But it sort of highlighted that fact of understand what your business is trying to do and how are you going to help them. And so when I came over to the private sector, into the financial world, I used to think about all the times we were doing investigations and we would ask them all this information and they would spit back all this great information to us in record time. And I'm like, gosh, the government could never move this fast. So you go over to financial services and find out, they just have a lot of people to throw at that problem. But there wasn't regulation in place. And so regulation came in place about 1.5 years after I got there. But in between there, it was how do we tell a company that's been operating for almost 30 years, hasn't had a problem, everyone's working fine, that we're going to put all these things in place. And it is, like Shawn mentioned and Matt mentioned, this is for the improvement and for the betterment of the company, and it is better for the clients. And if you trust the process, it's going to allow you to move a lot faster and do a lot more innovation, but at the same time remain secure. So it's really came back to building the relationships. Before that, I figured out I had to grow a beard. So that took about 6 years. But once the beard came in, that's what Matt and Shawn didn't say. You have to have a beard first. Then they take you serious. Now, I'm still working on the length of the beard, but once you get the beard in place, then you can start having these conversations, building these bridges, and start really bringing in the culture of security and having the discussion with the board. For me, it really came back to the first question any leader, the board, the executive team, they want to know, do you understand the business? Are you understanding what they're trying to achieve? And are you sympathetic to the fact that, yes, we want to do this, but we also want to get more leads in. We want to get a bigger pipeline in. We want to, attract more clients in. We want to go ahead and accept any emails that are coming in and work with them on this and show them this. Understood, but we're going to do it in a secure manner, and we're going to sort of build that culture so that they start thinking of it. And really, it just came back to relationship building, and then sort of showing, like Matt said, the progress. So here's where we started, and here's where we go through. And in any of the tougher areas that sort of face a little bit more resistance on. We worked them through tabletops. And so those tabletops from the beginning were set and designed to show all the things they thought were going to happen would never happen because they didn't have anything in place for that. So they thought, oh no, you can't breach us. Like, here's what's going to happen if that happens. I'm like, okay, so we'll walk through that. And do you know what happened now? And all the IT guys are in that room telling the leadership, no, I wouldn't know what to tell them. Like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And then I think those relationships sort of, and as you go through your security, they get to start to see all the innovation that you're doing. And then it's really that trust, relationship building that gets you to that level where you can start to innovate. And I'll take COVID is a perfect example for us of last budget cycle. I remember this, it was November, it was right after Thanksgiving, and we were going back and forth with the board and the CFO, and we're talking about, we want to increase our budget in this remote capability. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing we're talking about is, if you want to innovate and you see 3, 4, 5 years down the road that you're going to be in this area doing this financial planning, and then let us start investing now. And the end result now was we went 24 hours remote. Our competitors and other people in the industry were 1 to 2 months later.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
Build the relationships, grow the beard.
Well, so that's a good segue into building the relationships, government to commercial, right? So you've all, well, obviously Matt is in the government, but you've all had government experience. Shawn, maybe kick us off chatting about that. So what kind of things are you seeing in the CISO, community relationship kind of groups, or even in official programs like the Defense Industrial Base and those types of things, where you're reaching out and working with some of your colleagues that are still on the government side, like Matt, and trying to address some of the challenges that exist that are more than just your company or more than just the government, but they're national, holistic of all of us. And what kinds of things are happening right now that you're seeing to kind of help with that?
Yeah, so I think I moved way too far outside of the government to really get some of that. Outside of Burger King and Popeyes being on the military bases, and and in the Pentagon, I can't really go, hey, let's collaborate on this thing. But that being said, there's still some things. It's namely, one of the first things I did when I got down here, I think within the first month or so, is I reached out to the FBI contact in the local area, made it known, like, hey, I'm in this area, I'm the new CISO, call me directly. I want to establish a rapport so that I had that reporting piece in case something happened. Being an international company, I think it's going to be different when something does happen. So I haven't gotten there just yet. So there's a little bit of that, just knowing who your contacts were in case there is something on that level. But I'm still fairly active with the NIST. So like the NICE framework, which looks at the cybersecurity education and the workforce pieces, they are very big on making sure they get input from not only the government, academia, but also the corporate sector. And so in that space, I try to get there. The other aspect from that for us specifically is I do belong to like the RH ISAC, the Retail Hospitality ISAC, and as well as there's a ton of ISACs, the FS ISAC, et cetera. And that's kind of our pseudo bridge into the government when we have some of those ISACs, as well as the National Restaurant Association, who kind of represents us as a lobbyist to an extent, but they also have a mapping to cybersecurity piece. So not too much from my perspective. There is some legal piece where we reach out and like where we're helping out with some of the other items like the pandemic piece, where we're able to kind of see our app users and frequency of stuff like that, but not too much from our piece because I'm a little further outside of the bubble. And I think that's good. I think my industry getting too close to government right now would muddy the waters, because there's still a long ways for us as a career field entirely to go. And I think it should be the more regulatory or more regulated industries like banking or automotive or aviation, some of those. I think those and the government, we need to finish that before we start reaching into the next layer, which would be more the retail, hospitality, et cetera. So I think right now we have you guys have a little bit more work to flesh out getting there, and we'll have different influences when we get there. But I don't think people really see the cybersecurity in an automated kitchen just yet as a concern.
All right, well, we got about 10 minutes left. I want to give Matt a chance to comment on this one, just from a government perspective, and then let's spend the last few minutes with all three of you responding to more of a positive thing, which we'll get to in a second. So Matt.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, I mean, it's things like this, right? I mean, so Brett was talking earlier about building relationships before you need them. I can't pretend to be a super active LinkedIn person, but I do try to curate a network of people. Some of my favorite conversations are with people who have nothing to do with what I do. I mean, I've had great conversations with the CISO of Scott's Fertilizer and the guy who's CISO for Crocs, you know, those kinds of things, or, you know, with Shawn. And so it's building those relationships. And in often cases, it's just commiserating. It's some reassurance that you face the same challenges we do. I'm again, recognizing privilege with the agency, with an intelligence agency. I can kind of reach out to most people and say, hey, I'm an intelligence agency. I'd like to talk to you about what you do. And most people are like, oh, that's kind of cool. Even though what I do is basically spend all day in meetings and fill out forms. So there's some cachet there that benefits me. I mean, we go to conferences, we maintain relationships, we do presentations, we do outreach like this. In fact, our new facility that we're building in St. Louis, what we call it Next NGA West, builds in a public hub that will accommodate up to 800 people in dynamically reconfigurable space, you know, Wi-Fi covered for partners in education and all kinds of things. And that's just not the kind of stuff that most intelligence agencies do, certainly not one of the big five. So we're actually quite close to industry, I would say. We have an office in the Valley, in Silicon Valley, to help build those relationships, and an office of ventures and innovations who helps identify sort of early startups that we might invest in. And the intelligence community does invest in those as well, which people are often surprised to learn. So there's a lot of interface with industry. It's rarely work programs that yield specific outcomes. We don't share like that. I mean, we are still the government. But participation is pretty easy to come by. As Shawn got to the ISACs, you know, we contribute to the ISACs. We also, there's congressional and senatorial committees that bring industry and the government together for cool conversations. They're infrequent, they're pretty high level, but there's plenty of opportunities if people just capitalize on them.
Thanks, Matt.
Can I add just one quick thing on that, just because we ran into this when I first moved over. Even being in the government, I was able to use the cheat sheet, but I would say for the small, the medium-sized businesses, if you haven't quite hit that large enterprise yet, and you don't have those relationships, and you do run into an incident, most of the forensic firms out there will be able to speed up that bridge to the government. So if you need that, or you just need a contact to start running things through, like I ran into problems with InfraGard, and I had to call friends to actually get it all squared away, believe it or not. It took over a year for me to get access to InfraGard, which is crazy. But it really comes down to use those outside forensic firms. You can get them on zero retainer, but they will have direct access to the government, and they'll be able to help you bridge those gaps.
Absolutely.
Yes, they do.
Right, cool. Well, thank you all for that. Let's move to one last thing. So we had one of our speakers earlier asked this, and recently somebody else was doing a webinar where they asked what's wrong with cybersecurity. And there's a lot of negativity out there in general about all the things that are wrong, right? And so the big question, I think in a lot of people's minds is, you know, where's the positivity? What are we doing right? So if you can, we've got just a few minutes left, you know, in 5-ish words or so, you know, it'll go beyond 5 words, I'm sure, but what's right with security? Matt, we'll start with you.
Trending towards less paper, more data. Less paper, more data.
Less paper, more data. That's fair. That's fair. So that's what we're going with for Matt. See, he's not giving you much time there, Shawn.
I'm a government employee. I can follow directions.
John.
That's the sad thing is, I had a preview that this question was coming, and I still didn't come up with 5 words. Yeah. Increase 5 words. Geez. Increasing cybersecurity evangelism throughout the industry. That's 6, but
5-ish.
cybersecurity is 1 word in this case.
Well, the government says it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the evangelism and getting people to know about it. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that's extremely important, and one of the things I mean, that's part of why we're here with GRIMMCon, right? Like, obviously, COVID-19 and the whole situation, and stay-at-home orders, all that, but that's a big thing behind this, and why we spend so much time trying to support these conferences. And with what Matt had to say about why they're building facilities in certain places. You got a 3-letter agency that's doing so much to try to reach out. So yeah, very important. All right, Brett, lay some.
This is what we're doing right, correct? What we're moving in the positive direction.
yeah, we're doing right.
Networking and transparency. So this is the perfect example, but I think, hopefully everyone's starting to see it, but I've seen a huge shift in keeping all the known risks to yourself and not really speaking up. And now we're becoming more transparent. And like you said, like if I was talking to Shawn 7 years ago, I would have heard all these problems and like smirked and walked away, but not told him about my problems. And I think that communication and those barriers are coming down. And especially in our industry, we feel comfortable about calling one another and asking them how they're tackling certain problems now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Coming from the government, where you would reach out to all your peer CISOs, and it was no big deal because there's nothing competitive. When I came to this industry, I felt very abandoned, and I reached out to all my peer CISOs, and we've now established a private group that we all talk on and communicate with, and we're all open kimono. We want to help each other. We don't see ourselves as non-competitive. But the one thing I think that we need to start doing is in invading non-cybersecurity conferences and learning how the other people think. For the global CISO conferences that I'm on the board for, I've been asking to create a panel that has the CIOs or the CEOs or the CHROs speaking to us, and likewise I want to speak to them, because I think right now one thing that we're trending is a lot of support group that we are all looking for each other's shoulders to cry on, and we need to start sharing that with some outsiders, and then also learning their perspective.
Hey, Brett, Brian, I want to double dip if I could do just a quick second, because Shawn was hinting at it, but not quite in the same direction. Something that I think cybersecurity is doing well, but needs to do a lot better on, especially like on this panel, is diversity and inclusion. So, I mean, and it's not just because of this national moment, but in this panel is a good example of the kind of homogeneity that I think still affects our industry. And so I'm seeing better trends, right? All the lines are in the right place, but I think we could do better. I know our agency is working hard at doing better outreach, recruiting, retention, those kinds of things. So just wanted to
couldn't agree more. That's been a theme of several of the talks today. And very happy from that perspective with the majority of what we were able to do with the bringing in the different speakers, and not just the general view of the diversity, but also the international diversity. We've had people from all over the world bringing in other perspectives, and that's awesome. It is still a problem. I mean, it just is. We can do better. We're the ones who can make it better, and we're going to do that. So no, definitely appreciate that comment. Yeah. So any final comments from the panel here? And if not, I'm going to invite Bryson back in, and we'll say some closing things, and then move on to the virtual happy hours.
Who's going to say anything in between an happy hour? So
just get your screenshots now. Next year, I'm coming back with a bigger beard. So,
but yeah,
and Bryson looks like he was on an island with Tom Hanks. So
I thought it was Paul Rudd when I first dialed in. I was like, wow.
You thought I was Paul Rudd?
Polls. Yeah. You're also
is-
sort of backlit, so
That's a new one.
I'll take that for what it is.
You look like
all
you're handsome
lighting.
Hollywood, except for I couldn't really see you.
Yeah.
That sounds
So
accurate. I'll take
one
it.
one
I'll
note
take
I'll say, and I think I'll speak for the other four that are on the screen. Don't hesitate to ask questions of us or any other CISO. I know like Chris Zell for Wendy's, he did a podcast recently talking about that, where hey, we went through we've all made some stupid mistakes or made mistakes we wish we wouldn't have, or made decisions we wish we wouldn't have. But we ended up where we're at with all of our bumps and bruises, and you're going to have to earn them on your own, in your own way. But we want to help people of all diverse backgrounds do this, because ultimately, for me, like I think the group as a collective, I care about cybersecurity, and those are ones and zeros of all types of colors. And we want more people to be involved in it. And so if you want to be a CISO, some people don't, that's fine. If you want to be, or you just want to be able to communicate better to a CISO, don't hesitate to reach out.
The number one job of leaders is to make more leaders, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Bryson.
Yeah, so the Q&A is a great segue, because coming up now we have Birds of a Feather happy hours. If you go to Discord, we have a number of different topics where you can go, I would say one-on-one, but it's like one-on-n with various experts in various rooms. And unlike these where everybody else is muted, those ones, it's going to be fully open. So they're trying to facilitate a conversation on the different topics. Thank you to our panelists for coming in and closing out what has been a fantastic day. The reason we do this, of course, as Brian and everybody on here, is that we really are trying to push an environment of inclusivity, of helping others, of making the community better. Because at the end of the day, we are all in the same boat. Your threat is my threat. That's how internet-connected computers work. And I want to say thank you, especially to the volunteers. We have a number of folks who are not actually affiliated with us, but because they believe in those same values, really do a lot of hard work on Discord and a lot of things behind the scenes to make this happen. And then finally, of course, all of the staff at GRIM, the speakers and the coaches that made this happen. The next GRIMMCon will be December 30th. That's right, Brian?
That's correct. December 30th.
Yeah.
We'll probably do some other webinars and events leading up to it, but the next big event will be December 30th.
So thank you all for joining us.
Thanks for having
Thanks, everyone.
Here. Hey, Bryson.
Yeah.
You know what Discord channel people should look at to find where the happy hours are?
No, I don't.
I believe
All
it's in the general commentary, but you should be able to search our Discord public server. The link is up on our website, and you should be able to find the happy hours pretty easily. Just search for HH, and I'm sure you will find all the links.
Thank you much. Thank you,
All right,
gentlemen. It was
everyone.
awesome.
Thank you to everyone who came out.